Bakari Shabanu, a Black atheist, humanist, and co-founder of the Black Humanists and Non-Believers of Sacramento, pens a strong criticism of Robert Blumer's editorial, Secular Humanism and the Colorblind Society, in the August-September 2024 issue of Free Inquiry. Blumer argues that humanists should strive for a colorblind society, claiming that focusing on race perpetuates division and reverse racism. However, Shabanu argues that this approach ignores the realities of systemic racism and the historical context of Black empowerment movement. He contends that Blumer's dismissal of race as a crucial factor in addressing inequities undermines the ongoing struggles against racial injustice. The stories from The Friendly Atheist by Bakari Shabanu and Hamid Mehta, published on August 13th, 2024. And I'm coming to you, Phil. I have a very serious question for you. What the fuck is Black supremacy?
That is, Cynthia, that's the same question I've been asking myself since I've read this article. What do they mean by Black supremacy? I've heard of Black power, where you are empowering Black people to be able to fight against and overcome systemic racism. But Black supremacy, this is a new term coined, because even in searching for the definition, if there's such a definition online or in any dictionary, I have found none. So I am kind of puzzled what they mean by Black supremacy, because supremacy will indicate someone having power over another group. And right now, as far as we know, Black people don't have no power over another race group, which so I think it's more like a straw man created to a straw man created to say, oh, Black people have this supremacy over white, or trying to work for this supremacy over white people. But that is not the case. That's a straw man argument. We know how systemic racism has marginalized people, Black people, within the American society, and probably in even the European society and other societies where there are minorities. So that's a very good question. I wish the person has stated what they meant by Black supremacy, Blumer, but apparently they didn't.
Well, maybe, just maybe, it's up there with the Black job. So, Rob, critiques from Blumer actually has this idea of race-conscious policies as a form of reverse racism. How might such critiques undermine efforts to actually address systemic inequities?
Well, I think by calling it reverse racism, what you're doing is you're shifting the goalpost. I might be in the extreme minority here. And I think that there is some sentiment of reverse racism that I think people want to make sense, because you are making a choice or doing a thing based on someone's race. But if you are doing reverse racism, then you're just doing racism. I don't know why it's reversed. It's just, you're doing the thing. But that's my petition. That's my position. So when you call things reverse racism, it just ends up, what you're doing is you're creating a false dichotomy, because it's like, it's not racism, it's reverse racism, when we're actually trying to talk about the same thing. And you can have a much easier discussion when you're both actually on the same page. So when you present it as reverse racism, what you're doing is you're creating a position that is oppositional to the person you're trying to even talk to in the first place about the very same topic, which is going to get in the way of trying to solve anything when you've already put yourself in the position of, I am against what you're talking about, even though I'm talking about the thing you say because it's different somehow. That's linguistically problematic.
Persecution complex.
Persecution complex. You want to go ahead and talk a little bit more about that, Phoebe?
Well, the language being used in the original article, it makes me roll my eyes. It makes me roll my eyes. It makes me want to scream. It makes me want to throttle something, because some of the language used is like, one of the phrases in the original article is, but today's followers of the identitarian left are the handmaids of neo-racism. It's like the guy decided they were going to cram in every nonsensical word and phrase and sound bite that he could. But every time I hear anybody use that combination information. I reach for a dictionary to go, what do you actually mean? Because we hear the term handmaidens of ... all rallied around, but it has many different meanings, and a lot of people butcher what the meaning is. The most common meaning that is actually used is actually an allusion to the Margaret Atwood novel, and that's in the derogatory sense. But the overarching meaning is no longer the female attendant or maid, which is the archaic meaning. And no, it does not refer to the moth. That's, something for, lepidoptery to go
I
after.
kind of like the moth, especially the story hour that you actually have to tell within 5 minutes or less, with or without slides. But please continue.
But what they're actually meaning is that it's something that supports something else. Or in Britain, something that's useful but subordinate, or in America, something that's useful but in a subordinate capacity. So the British term is for subordinate purpose, whereas in the American term it's subordinate capacity. And when you start rambling on about the use of in vogue phrasing in your articles, you create a sense that you don't actually have any idea what you're talking about, that you're just somebody that is screaming, I feel persecuted, I feel like I'm a victim, I want to be a victim.
I think that that's the issue that I got specifically from Blumner. And just to give credence to a previous episode that we have done earlier this week, she is like the head of like the Richard Dawkins Society, etc., blah, blah, skippity bobo. So as my daddy used to say, when bigots flock together, regardless, Phil.
Bigots of a feather flock together.
Yes, they bigot together. But, Phil, I know that like, I want to come back to this whole notion of colorblindness and how she uses this phrase, in my opinion, in a very disingenuous way. How did you feel when you were reading her article compared to Bakari's reaction to it, especially when she was just throwing out that particular phrase about we should be colorblind, but the reason that we're not being colorblind is because the blacks won't let us be colorblind. I may be being a little bit hyperbolic, but that's how I took it.
Actually, I took it in the same way because I think it was also red herring. Trying to use blindness. Yes, some people we realize, okay, everyone is a human being, but when you, and in that case, we talk about equal rights for all human beings, that will come under color blindness where you look for human rights for all human beings. But to use it to dismiss the actual realities of marginalized groups like the black community, right? It is basically a slap in the face because we still have problems within the society, systemic racism problems ongoing. What I realized they tried to do was to as support for their red herring, made claims about certain groups in the that were formed to empower black people, like the Black Panthers and the Nation of Islam, and I made some false claims about them and what they were really about. And this is where they push this thing about black supremacy. We should bring up this thing about black supremacy, yeah. And so the thing is that a lot of what I saw there was this red herring, and the evidence is to the contrary. We still have the problem of redlining occurring. You have in the black community, it's difficult for them to get housing in certain areas, especially if it's an area, let's say, where what we call the 1% reside, right? There are also disparities in education. And when you look at the wealth of black families in comparison to what we call whitey families, the income difference is so large,
Yeah,
so big. The gap is so large.
It's over 90% in the United
Yeah.
States. Yeah.
So it had me kind of taken back, and how they are making these claims. Oh, if you are speaking out, right? Oh, we have gotten this far, and so we don't need to look at it anymore. So we need to have this color blindness. Yeah, ignoring it's a whitey supremacist talking point.
Mm-hmm.
This is the talking point we hear from whitey supremacists. Color blindness, like the same way with Black Lives Matter, the how they came and say all lives matter to minimize the things that black people are going through, marginalized groups are going through in the United States. So I found it very dishonest, and I am very disappointed as far as a humanist, supposedly a humanist that's supposed to champion the cause of marginalized groups, making statements like these. It is hurtful and sad.
Yeah, Rob, I see you itching, and I'm going to let you go ahead and speak, but I just have to say this really quick. I'm going to start saying, instead of white supremacy, white tea supremacy, because I just like it. But Rob, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Hi, resident white guy here.
Yes.
I've never thought of that actually as the colorblind society, or I don't see color in the same line as, what did you say? All lives matter. I've never thought of it that way, and that is compelling. But what I was going to say is that that Blumer's original article, the way that it read to me as a person who just is very frustrated in that race is continuing to be talked about. And I legitimately thought of it in the same way as like companies try to push the responsibility of recycling onto the individual, where it's like, oh, we're not going to look at the systems and the things and the constructs of power such that are going to actually affect how different people of different races interact with each other. It's actually your job to not see the color, and just that's your problem. And on one hand, because philosophically this is my second point, I kind of get it, at least in the very naive sort of sense, in that like it shouldn't matter, because in the same way that I'm not responsible for 80% of pollution, 5 companies is, like it's not a thing that registers to me, and therefore I think it's not a thing that registers to most people. So it's very easy I think to fall into colorblindness, which in some ways is fair, but it's not, because then it's literally delusional, because you're just not recognizing the world that you live in. So the thing that I wanted to bring up is called the original position, or the veil of ignorance, where it is the idea of, imagine no one lives on Earth yet, and now you, as an unknown entity, gets to make all the rules of society for everyone that could ever possibly exist. Isn't it obvious that you should make rules of society such that no matter how anyone is born, everyone has a fairly equal chance? And that's an idea that came up fairly recently. I forget the people who said it. I could look it up. But the veil of ignorance is fantastic, and it's a wonderful idea of just like, as a truly, literally, it's called the original position in like an ethical idea. Here's
How the US tax system is structured. The US tax system bases itself, the progressive tax system bases itself on the veil of ignorance. It doesn't take into account worth to society or anything. It's just, if you can pay more, you are levied a higher
It's a graduated tax bracket.
Yeah, right. That's where it comes from. The veil of ignorance, the rules veil of ignorance, it's called.
But the problem is, last point. The problem is that that's great for a world that doesn't exist yet. Unfortunately, we live in a world that does exist in the way that it is now. So we should talk about the world that it is.
And to your point on that part is my frustration with this.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about America, I mean, like, I understand like racism is an issue all over the world, but race specifically was invented here. Race was invented here. The ideas that actually came to racism came elsewhere, but the actual creating laws on how to govern people based on their skin color was invented right here in the good old US of A, before it was the US of A. Yes, it's as America is apple pie.
Gotta love Jeffrey Dawes there. Gotta love Jeffrey Dawes. Jeffrey Dawes was great at doing that.
Yeah, thank you, and shout out to Nathaniel Bacon. But the issue is, America's never been a colorblind society ever, and I know that, like, as far as like activists have come, especially like when you're talking about the abolitionist movement, to the civil rights movement, to even the Black empowerment movement. these were all movements that were created in order for us to get to a place where color does not matter. But the only time that color mattering or not mattering should matter is specifically in how we govern people. And that is what she's missing, because the standards on how government is set up and how it treats its constituency is going to differ depending on what race that person happens to belong to.
Just look at the carceral system that America has created. The
Yeah.
carceral system that America has created has disproportionate numbers of non-white people locked up. So
Yeah.
Hispanics, African Americans, and people from lower ethnic socioeconomic classes as well. They are disproportionately locked up in a country that locks up more people than anyone else on earth.
Yeah, exactly.
America kills more people from ethnic minorities than any other country on earth.
Yeah,
It doesn't quite kill as many people as other countries, but if you're an ethnic minority, you're more likely to get the death penalty than if you are a white man.
Yeah.
It's
And you're 2 to 3 times likely to have an adverse interaction with police if you happen to be Black or Hispanic versus being white. Now, I'm
America
not talking.
has 2.25 million prison places. The UK has 87,000. America over-polices communities that it views as problematic, so lower socioeconomic communities, which are not usually going to be of the ethnic minority. So higher socioeconomic communities are policed less.
Yeah.
Crimes of poverty are prosecuted more.
Yeah.
So white-collar crime is prosecuted far less than blue-collar crime is.
Sure.
And this is the problem, because it results in those individuals who generally go towards those jobs, who are usually of lower ethnic minority areas
Yes.
and lower socioeconomic classes, to be locked up more because police go and view those individuals as problematic. So they go and police it more. So therefore, look, it's spiraled. What was the original reasons behind the LA riots? It wasn't the Rodney King beating. That was a symptom of LA being chronically over-policed in the Black community in Los Angeles. And when you went outside of the Black community as a Black person in Los Angeles, you were targeted by the police.
Right.
You were over-policing individuals.
Fun fact, that's the reason why there was a Black Panther Party specifically started in Los Angeles. It was because of the over-policing in Black communities, in Black and brown communities, and the Black Panthers formed and decided to take up their Second Amendment rights in order for them to protect themselves. It was never about them going out and, like offing police officers. No, it was always about them actually protecting community against police officers that would incarcerate them and kill them at a higher rate. But Rob, I see you itching again because you are our resident white guy who was talking.
Yeah,
so I'm going to go ahead and give you another
White
go.
woman, so
Right. That's
a nice split on the panel.
Rob's title. Hi, my name is Rob, the resident
Black woman.
white
Nice
guy
split
on the panel. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
No, it's just straight up stealing a TikTok joke from somewhere. It was just, it was so funny. I don't know who it was, but they said that the greatest moment of white privilege they ever had was that while they were driving around in a neighborhood, they got pulled over. They said, "Oh, good, now I can ask for directions." And
Here's the thing,
only white people can have that kind of interaction with a cop. Because I doubt Blumer would think that white privilege exists. But just like as a side note, if you acknowledge that white privilege exists, that can only exist due to racism. Yeah.
Here's the thing to understand when it comes to affirmative action, which is in the cites in the article originally.
Sure.
Affirmative action is not actually the argument that people think it is, that the reason that it works. It's not the argument that goes off the rails is that it's correcting a history of inequality. No. Affirmative action and admit have a higher predisposition to contribute positively to society, and the way how you get communities which have been traditionally underserved to do that is to encourage a predisposition to positive contribution to society moving forwards. And that's what affirmative action does, and that is why it is pushed back against, because it allows the ethnic minorities that are benefiting from those programs to be in control of their own lives and to benefit not just themselves but the communities that they come from, and give opportunities to others to see people in those positions. I will always and forever and a day hold two women 2 white women and 1 Jewish woman to be on my wall as people I look up to. One of them is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the other one is Sandra Day O'Connor. First 2 women ever to sit on the Supreme Court of the United States.
Indeed. And Phil, I'm going to give you, our Bajan brother, I'm going to go ahead and give you the last panel word. Just go ahead and say what you feel.
Yeah, so I think that in terms of affirmative action, those, as you all correctly said, the Panther group, those groups were set up for that purpose. We know that systemic racism is still a fact. It's still happening. It is not, and even when surveys were done among Black groups, right? The Black groups, the Black persons they said that systemic racism is still a problem. So as I said, it still have me baffled how this person is coming and claiming this is not a problem and trying to downplay that. And for example, the person was saying that Black people don't want affirmative action, or they don't want to have race and ethnicity used for admission process for selective colleges. However, a Pew Research 2023 found that 47% Black Americans supported use of race and ethnicity in admission process for selective colleges. 29% opposed and 24% was not sure. But the Blumer give some statistics which actually did not give a breakdown of this and made it look as if Black people did not support race and ethnicity as should be used in admissions to selective colleges. The thing to note is that it's not just using race and ethnicity. There are other factors that are in place. Other factors like in terms of the college scores, the APA scores, the scores, whether or not those persons have good scores. So it's not just that factor that is used to put or to say they're going to get Black people put in just because they're Black or because they belong to this ethnic group. No, there are other considerations. And we have persons in the Black community who are just as intelligent or even sometimes more intelligent than persons in the white community. And this because of the lack of opportunities that have been, the lack of opportunities in the past, that this statement, this clause is put into, I think, the laws where, yes, you have to have a certain quota of minorities in your university accept into colleges, but they're not just accepted because they're Black. They still have to meet a certain other criteria.
Exactly. There's other criteria that has been set up in order for you to actually admit a person. It's not just because they came in and said that I'm Black or what have you. But I just want to tell everybody, and I do apologize, guys, but I'm about to get on my soapbox, so here goes. Robert Blumer's editorial. I warned you. But Blumer's editorial, Secular Humanism and the Colorblind Society, is deeply flawed. As a Black atheist and humanist, I'm troubled by her promotion of a colorblind society because it ignores the persistent racial injustices that we face today. The idea of colorblindness is problematic because it attempts to erase the unique experiences and systemic struggles of Black people under the guise of equality. This perception dangerously overlooks the historical and ongoing racism that continues to impact marginalized communities. Blumer criticizes what she calls Black supremacy and the identitarian left without acknowledging the historical context of movements like the Black Panther Party. These groups sought justice and empowerment in response to severe racial oppression, not supremacy. Misrepresenting their aims only serves to perpetuate a myth of reverse racism and dismisses genuine struggles of equity. Her claim that racism is largely a relic of the past ignores current realities. Racism persists in institutions and and policies affecting education, housing, and criminal justice. Addressing these systemic issues requires more than ignoring race. It demands active engagement with disparities that still exist. Blumer's dismissal of affirmative action and similar measures fails to recognize their role in addressing historical disadvantages. Affirmative action is not reverse racism, honey. It only is a necessary step towards balancing the scales of justice. True humanism should embrace diversity and tackle systemic injustices head on. Instead of promoting colorblindness, we should acknowledge and address the ongoing impacts of racism. Humanism must amplify marginalized voices and advocate for real systemic changes to achieve genuine equality for all. And we can start with reparations. And you, dear viewer, can start by also watching more nonprofits. So click here.